We're going to go over the day in the life of a welder and some of the things that are required to become certified, and the type of employment that you might seek out at that point. My name is Daniel Carrier. I'm a high-pressure 2 welder, which means that I've got pipe certification to weld engineered pipe, as well as my journeyman. It's a Red Seal certification, which is recognized across Canada. I work at the Dorsey Converter Station for Manitoba Hydro. It's just outside of the city. It's a pretty interesting place to work. We'll go over some of the hydro details a little later. Previous to joining hydro, I got my experience as a welder in a repair shop, machining shop, which was pretty good because the variety was, you never knew what was going to come in, and you never knew if you were going to repair something or build something, fabrication from scratch. It was quite interesting. Had a lot of good tradesmen around me, and it gave me the experience and the qualifications I needed to apply for a job as a welder at hydro. I joined in 2008. They then registered me as an apprentice, which was something that I was looking for in an employer. At that point, once I completed that, I acquired my Red Seal journeyman status. And another thing that's required at hydro is to not only get a Red Seal, but potentially getting qualified to weld pipe, because there are a lot of piping systems and boilers and all kind of things that requires it. So I acquired my F3, F4 pressure pipe certification, and after that, enabled me to go for specialty pipe tickets, and then I chose to do the stainless steel because there is a lot of that where I work. So why would you pursue welding as a career? There are many reasons that I chose welding. One thing that I was really aware of is that it was high in demand, and I knew that if I'd get involved with welding and learn the trade, that I'd almost be guaranteed always employment. It's also regulated, it's certifiable, so you know that there's certain guidelines and certain practices, so it's a controlled environment. Whether you work in a company like hydro or in a big industrial job, manufacturing, or whether you're in a small shop, there's going to be a large variety, and that's something that I look forward to. It gives me satisfaction daily about the things I've achieved and some of the problems that I've solved throughout the day. There are various tasks as a welder that you'll have to do. A lot of them are physical, and a lot of them are things that you'll have to figure out and reference and look up. You'd be shearing, sawing, grinding, a lot of power tools. You have to drill, you have to brush metal. You got some common hand tools like your chipping hammers, your grinders. You'll have to maintain a lot of things like pressurized vessels, oxyacetylene cutting torches. You'll have to maintain the machines you're using, the welding machines. You'll have to weld various metals. You'll have to know how the metals are made up and what composition they're made up of and what kind of welding rods or technique you're going to use for those. You're also going to do some gas brazing and some soldering as well. You'll be doing inert gas welding, flame cutting, and you'll be treating metal with different heat methods to harden or soften or bend different metals. You'll learn a lot of that. You'll learn that stuff in school. It's an extensive program, so it's pretty good. In addition to these manual skills, you'll also have to have a knowledge of metallurgy. You'll have to know the codes. It's regulated by law. You have to remember how materials perform and react for different applications. You'll have to recall procedures. You'll work for a company, they'll have procedures and guidelines about how you do these things, and you've got to adhere to these things. A lot of times work gets inspected, and a lot of times you've got to stamp your welder number on the welds that you make. So it's really important to maintain the quality. at all times. Here are some of the common processes that you're probably familiar with. A lot of these. Manufacturing uses a lot of MIG, it's what it's referred to, which is actually gas metal arc welding. There's a shielding gas that runs through the gun. It protects the weld until it cools. There's a continuous wire feed, and it's a short-circuiting system. Now, where you got to do applications out in the field and outside in the wind or whatnot, you'll be mostly using stick welding, which is shielded metal arc welding. There'll be hundreds of different electrodes for different jobs. You've got to know which one to use, which position, angle, and heat techniques, and various things like that. And then there's the TIG welding, which can be also creative. You make very nice, pretty looking welds with that, but you could also use that for pressure vessels, for stainless steel. It's very accurate, precise method of doing it. So since there are all kinds of metals and things are manufactured differently, you've got to remember the capability of various types of rods, what you can and can't do, and the best technique, how to apply them. So what's an industrial welder? An industrial welder is a interprovincial Red Seal certification, and your credentials, are recognized across Canada. A welder is a trade official Red Seal occupation title approved by the Canadian Council of Directors of Apprenticeship. So welders are referred to differently from province to province, and there's a little chart there that shows. In Manitoba, we're referred to as industrial welders, and a lot of other provinces just simply call you a welder. In Alberta, you'll hear a lot about B pressure ticketed welders. This is certification to work on the pipeline and on pressure vessels. Now, the apprenticeship program for industrial welders. The method you go about becoming a certified welder is you first have to have an employer who's willing to contact apprenticeship on your behalf. He's willing to take you on as an apprenticeship. They have to register you. And once you've registered, you're going to receive an apprenticeship card, and you're also going to receive a blue book or a report of hours book. Now, this is really important that your hours get logged into this book. You're not going to be logging your hours, but it's important you get the experience welding and doing the welder's tasks so that your journeyman can sign off that you've learnt and you've got the job experience necessary to take the various levels in school. You're going to be assigned a journeyman to work with you, or maybe possibly a few journeymans that specialize in different areas. And they're there to give you the practical experience and to hand over their knowledge so that you can learn how to do it correctly. Now, when you're called to go into school, you either get mailed or called, or your employer will let you know. At that point, your hours have to be updated, and they have to be forwarded to Apprenticeship Manitoba. If you don't have your blue book updated, you could end up being in school and having the teachers or the school telling you that you can't participate for that year. It's happened to me once, and I had to make quite a few phone calls and a few faxes later, and I was able to, I think by the second day of class, my information was there, so they allowed me to continue on. So the journeyman or your employer is going to verify these hours. So if there's a problem with that, you're going to be talking to the Department of Labor, Apprenticeship, and your employer, and getting them to coordinate that everything's in place for your school. So in addition to completing a minimum of 1,600 hours on a job training practical experience, you need 1,600 hours for each of these 3 levels. There's 3 boxes there. They indicate basically the curriculum of what you're going to learn in schools. I don't know if you could read it all. If anybody wants another look at it later, you can come up and I'll go through some of these with you. So there's 3 levels. Upon completing each of those levels, if you have your work time, then you'll be able to complete the level. You'll have an exam at the end of each level, written exam, as well as a practical exam. Now the practical exam changes from each of the 3 levels. They include more steps, more positions. You're going to be welding plates. You'll be by yourself in a booth. The teacher's going to come along and inspect you as you're doing the work. And if you don't adhere to the rules, they're going to toss your plate in the trash bin, and you're going to have to restart. You're going to have to wait. I think it's a period of minimum 2 to 3 weeks, I believe, and then you could go in for a retest. This is when you're going to be sweating bullets the most, is when you do the practical exam. So once you've completed all 3 levels for a total of 4,800 industry hours you need, then you'll be able to complete it. At that point, you can write the interprovincial exam. There's a final practical exam as well, which you've got to complete in order to do the interprovincial exam. If everything's good and you've completed the practical portion, you'll write this exam. I think the Department of Labor issues the exams, and then it's a waiting game to see if you've passed. You won't know right away, but if you've passed it, it'll be the best feeling in the world. If not, you're going to have a waiting period and go in and redo the exam. So then you'll get a card with a stamp like this on it. You'll have a number on there, and this is recognized across Canada. Just briefly wanted to show you possibly some of the positions you'll be doing in the practical exam here. Okay, so while you're doing the 3 levels, you'll be doing plates similar to these. Now, if you see up here, we've got a groove weld on plates. This is what you're going to be doing. Typically, you'll start with the flat position. You'll practice that till you're just sick of it before you can even move on to the 2G, which is horizontal, and 3G, which you're welding upwards. And by the level 3, you're going to have to complete all of these 4 plates. Once you've successfully completed those plates and the teacher's happy with it visually, he's going to have you cut them into sections, strips going across the weld. They're going to take that to a hydraulic press, and they're going to bend these right over. They're going to try to break them. And if it tears or it breaks, that plate isn't any good. You failed that portion. You're going to have to wait, practice up, and try it again. Once you've completed your industrial welder and you've got your red seal, then that entitles you to become certified as a pipe welder. Now, for pipe welding, what you're going to do is you're going to have a piece of pipe on a brace or an arm. It's going to be in a 45-degree position. That's called a 6G. Now, the 6G replaces other methods where you have to set the pipe horizontally, then vertically. Now it's all inclusive. You just do it in the 6G. It's pretty tricky, but it's a higher it's a more difficult skill to master. Therefore, they've chosen this as the method to ensure the quality. So why should you learn a trade within hydro? There are many reasons. Mostly, it's interesting work. You're always learning. Doesn't matter how many years I work for hydro, I'm still learning new things. You work independently as well. You work in teams. You got quite a bit of freedom to make decisions on things. You've got people you can consult with, other trades you're going to work with. It pays very well. Another good benefit is it's, especially the time we're in right now, there are a lot of people retiring with a lot of skills. So all the trades are in high demand right now. It's a really rewarding area to work in. More and more safety is a concern, and it's less back-breaking work, and it's a lot more about your smarts and what you know and how to do a job safely and correctly now. So to be a welder in Manitoba Hydro, you need a minimum of grade 12. You may need your math and physics. You may need to upgrade those. Hydro has methods of helping you with that. You also, as a welder, you'll need to be licensed. As we went over before, some of the licenses and things I had to go through. It's you've got to be licensed according to Manitoba's Department of Labor laws. You've got to adhere to the ASME codes. That's the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Also CSA standards. You've got to have a current driver's license. Because of the remote locations and a lot of driving you'll have to do, you need a current license. If you don't have a license, you may struggle. They can accommodate people, but it depends on your circumstances. You got to be able to cooperate and work safe with others, be courteous, responsible. We don't discriminate against anybody. You got to follow standards, procedures, and our policies within Hydro. Sometimes people overlook the physical aspects of whatever trade or jobs they're looking into. As a welder, you're gonna have some physical aspects there. It's just common knowledge that you're gonna have to work with metal. Metal's not light. You're gonna have to cut, lift, grind. You got to hold up a grinder. It's fairly physical, but anybody can do it and can overcome those physical limitations. We can accommodate things like that. We have regular safety meetings. We go over some of the things that have been going on. If there are any incidents that have happened, we'll talk about those in a safety meeting with our safety officers. We'll go over what went wrong, what can we do to ensure it doesn't happen again. Part of the daily things we do is we have to have tailboard meetings. We've got to prepare job plans. Everybody in our crews, everybody that we're working with has to be aware of what's going on or any other work that's taking place adjacent to you or close to where you're working. You've got to have people understand what you're doing. They've got to read over a job plan. So what we have here is we've got two welders. They're preparing a job plan, that yellow sheet you see on the welding table there. They're filling out all kinds of details pertaining to the job, or if there are any hazards, any needs. And everybody's got to understand. Everybody's got to sign this. And if anybody's uncomfortable with anything that's going on, we've got to address those issues, eliminate the risk, eliminate the hazards. If you're not comfortable with something, you don't have to do it. We'll make sure that it's safe before, or that you're comfortable with it before you go ahead and do anything. PPE. Personal protective equipment. It's worn at all times. Different equipment to protect you from different jobs. This is a picture of what a welder generally wears for most of his work. So you're going to have an auto darkening helmet. You're going to have safety glasses under that helmet. At times you wear a particle mask. You're going to have a chipping hammer. You're going to be wearing leather. You're going to get burnt if you don't wear leather. You've got to protect yourself. You're going to have gloves. You're going to have certified work boots, the appropriate clothing for the appropriate job. Tools and equipment, you've got to inspect those daily. Before you do a job, you inspect all your equipment, anything like that. If something breaks, you report it. You get it fixed. You send it in for repairs, whatever it is. You don't take a broken tool and start working with that. So here they've got an oxyacetylene set. They're checking the regulators, making sure the pressure is good, going over the torches, the hoses, making sure there's no leaks. Now remember that pipe in the 45-degree position I was showing you? That's a steel pipe, a carbon pipe. Here they're practicing. So you have someone holding the pipe there while the other welder is fixing it in place on the stand. You start out in a 45-degree position like that. He's stick welding it, and what he's using is a 60-10 pipe welding rod. So he's using a 60-10 rod, he's stick welding, and he's welding a groove weld in a 6G on a piece of pipe. Now this is a tricky technique, but it's something you've got to know if you want to be a pipe welder. What he's doing there is he's putting in a root pass. That's the most important part of the weld. If you don't have a successful root, you don't move on and keep slopping more weld on top of that, because that doesn't help anything. What you do is you weld from the outside, and what you're trying to achieve is you're trying to achieve a weld on the inside of the pipe. That's why you need a special rod just for that. So on the right-hand side, you see that the arc is coming right through that pipe, and that's what you want at all times. So if you've done it right, the perfect pipe weld will be clearly visible on the inside. It'll be continuous. There can't be any little stops or breaks or any sags in it, or else, again, you're going to have to redo it. So why should you learn a trade? Well, here's some of the reasons I like it, because it gives me a variety. It's never really boring. I get to work outdoors a lot. A lot of times I'm in the shop. But something that's really important to me, and it fulfills the creative side in me, is welding. It gives me a creative sense, and I get that pride that I've completed and done something. It looks good. It makes me proud to see what I've done in a day. Women are not excluded from the trade. In fact, some of the best welders are women. They do very well. So here's some of the reasons why. I mean, they've got small hands and they've got good dexterity. You've got to have control. You've got to be steady. Good hand-to-eye coordination. You know, they follow instructions very well. They're safety-oriented. They project a good company image, and they're great with customer service as well. Here's some of the women that weld in the trade. On the left, the left to you, that's a girl that works with us. Her name is Jade. She's a very excellent welder. She is hired at the same time as me. She generally does a lot of these presentations, but she wasn't available for it this time. Here Jade is making a walkway that bridges over pipe so that other workers can get above and around there without tripping or hurting themselves. She's also on the right-hand side there. She's preparing some stairs that she's then going to attach to that. Again, there's a lot of variety. You're not just welding pipe all the time. A lot of times you're doing structural weld like she is doing here. You're going to have to lift heavy objects. You're going to have to climb. You're going to have to work at heights. It will come up. You might be in a man lift. You might be on top of a transformer. You will have to use various equipment that you'll be trained for, scissor lifts and these such things. You may work in a confined space. As a welder, you may have to open up a hatch and climb into a tank or something like that. So there's procedures for this. I mean, there's safety methods in place, so it's pretty good. It works out all right. You've got to be able to follow written and oral instructions. You've got to have good hearing. We're tested for hearing regularly. Vision, of course, as a welder, you got to see what you're doing. You got to adapt. There's always changes going on. Just because there's a method of doing something one week, it doesn't mean it's not going to change. The industry changes a lot. Some of the safety changes, so you got to be able to adapt to those. You got to have good communication. A lot of times the misunderstandings is just communication errors, and that's when sometimes things can go wrong. You got to be willing to travel, and again, you need your driver's license. Here are some of the rates. These are the maximum rates according to the different levels and progressions. As a trainee, you'll be making roughly $18 an hour. It depends which trade and which program you've been hired into. Once you've got your red seal and you've become a journeyman, you'll be making roughly $29 an hour. After that, you can take your pipe tickets that we spoke of. Now, there's two levels to that. You can have your basic pipe ticket, that's a pressure one. And then if you get your second pipe ticket, that'll be a specialized ticket depending which station you're in. For me, it's stainless steel, and I've acquired that as well. So then you're a pressure 2. there's one position for a senior welder, and he's also has to have all of the following statuses before becoming a senior welder.